Let's continue our reading of Foster book that is called The Return of Nature. As a non-native English speaker, I just I just wish that I could improve my English. So this video is just a way to keep me focused. So it is important to emphasize the citation of Hogeband. It is important to emphasize that the distribution of purchasing power to increase the volume of effective demand is essentially different from the view the held by the pioneers of socialism 50 or 100 years ago. It would have been regarded as damn, it didn't work. It would have been regarded by them as a capitulation to the prevailing doctrine of laissez-faire, against which they revolted. Men like Owen and Morris were far less taken in by the glamour of capitalism than we are. They were not content to criticize it because it distributed its products unjustly or because it was incapable of producing a large a quantity of goods as planned by economy could deliver. They also, and more especially, attacked it because it was not producing the kind of goods which are good for people to want and to strive for. They were not hypnotized by the liberal delusion that things people have been educated to demand by capitalist advertisement are necessarily the things they need most. Today, we are apt to dismiss the lament on the ugliness which capitalist enterprise has bequeathed us as mere aestheticism with no significance for a realist political program. What is called realism implies servile acceptance of the three cardinal errors of the capitalist ideology. The first is the assumption that the greatest good of the greatest number is achieved by producing the greatest number of sellable goods and ensuring that the greatest number of people can take their choice. The second is that the large community is a necessary condition of high productive capacity, which is obviously false. And the third is that peace between nations can only be ensured by a maximum division of labor with free trade. I believe that each of these postulates is sociological false. Sociologically false. So said Hogben. It was it was Maurice Hogben's sister who had pointed to a wider, more coherent more coherent socialist strategy, more attuned to people's real needs. Morris contends that the drabness of capitalism is its chief condemnation. Morris was a sound social psychologist in recognizing that socialist program cannot afford to neglect the fact that people want their lives to be picturesque. He was sound biologist in believing that he could make Britain so beautiful that people would neither need nor wish to travel. If we are to plan, if we wa- if we are to plan for survival, our first aim must be to create a social environment in which the setting of the family is satisfying because it is picturesque. It may be that the mere survival of socialism will demand the same orientation of social values. Like Maurice, Hogben contend that socialism must reject the prevailing pattern of passive satisfaction and conspicuous expenditure, encouraged by an increasing multiplicity of useless commodities and new distractions, or else socialism would undermine the reason for its own existence. There is no reason why socialism should identify scientific planning with an exclusively mechanical technology. Again, like Maurice, Hogben support the feminine point of view that the future required a much closer approximation to equality of wealth between men and women as well than most socialists now advocate. In his 1938 The Retreat from Reason, Hogan took the side of William Blake and Maurice against the dog's satanic nails and the dictatorship of production and consumption. It is now the fashion, he stated, to regard men like Morris and Carpenter as charming but ineffective cranks. Yet, um, yet their ecological concerns, like those of Blake before them, pointed to the most urgent needs in 28th century and reflect a wisdom transcending economic utilitarianism and urban socialism. The England which Blake loved was a land in which the energy of wind and water was replacing the slave labor of classical civilization. The discovery of electricity and of the light metals has now shown us how the power which drove those old water wells could wow the work of the dark satanic mills and do it better. An ecological society, Hogan insists, would not see the standard of living as defined in terms of the variety of commodities which are produced, but would be concerned with genuine human needs and the wider environment of human community. Let me mark this. Um, why else has Blake poem been sung and quoted until we are almost tired of it if the masses really prefer the passive enjoyment provided by cheap gramophones in a label-saving flat to a life in touch with the world of nature, an ecological society, and sublime. Forget the word for this. In ecological society, Hogbensis would not see the standard of living um, is defined in terms of the variety of commodities which are produced, but all would be concerned with the genuine human needs and the wider environment, human community. Likewise, in his 1943 Dangerous Truths, Hogben was to make strong case for following the order social, not concerned simply with the economic expansion. Expansion represented by Robert Owen and Morris. What made this approach to socialism so vital was its wider environmental perspective. It saw the hypertrophied metropolitanism of capitalist evolution, with its urban congestion as a major problem, in opposition to liberal doctrine that prosperity is being able to choose the greatest variety of goods. This other socialism, most clearly defined by Morris, asserted the need to decide where the dark satanic mills were making things which are good for men to choose, and the effects on the environment. So far, so good, isn't it? Let me take a picture of this. Hugban's social, socio-ecological perspective was especially evident in his treatment of race. The racialist doctrine he wrote in the Retreat from Reason was no serial title to be accepted as a biological interpretation of history until until the ecological factors and cultural differentiation have been explored exhaustively. As Nosara's title to be accepted as a biological interpretation of history and until the ecological factors and cultural differentiation have been explored exhaustively. What was needed was the development of human ecology as a field. Man is bringing into being a worldwide ecology in his own. This worldwide ecology means that geographical localized communities are not more interdependent, they are less so. An attempt to examine race independent of social and ecological conditions, that is, environmental factors, was bound to fail. As he was to declare decades later in an address on the race concept, human society is a unique ecological system or a human ecological system in which elements of its environment are cumulatively transformed and transmitted by cultural historical means, where acknowledgement of that fact proved fatal to the race concept. Beginning in 1930s, when he took up the chair in social biology at London School of Economics, Hogben devoted his efforts to combating biological racism in its criticism of apartheid. Prior to the 1930s, critics of eugenics in Britain, such as E. Ray Lancaster, were extremely rare, and among geneticists, only William Patterson seems to have exhibited doubts. All of this changed with Hogben's return from South Africa, determined to oppose biological racism, eugenics, and apartheid. A number of figures and in the eugenics community, such as biochemist Frederick Mott, had laid stress on the role of the environment, social as well as natural, as a major factor in the development of human beings. But there was no clear division between nature innate and nurtured social environment advocates. Hmm. As Pauline M.H. Mazumdar noted in her 1992 work Eugenics, Human Genetics, and Human Tailings, it was at this time that the link between the left and environmentalism was forged. The explicit use of environment as means of out-attacking eugenics began in 1931 with the work of Lancelot Hogben. In that year, Hogben published his Genetic Principles in Medicine and Social Science concerned with racism, dedicating it to Levy and explicitly referring to Marx's socioeconomic analysis, along with the direct introduction of environmental factors. Hogben, a sophisticated mathematician, employed various new mathematical techniques used by German geneticists. As Mazumder explains, Hogben took up German mathematical Mendelism and the blood group studies that went with it as a means of attacking British eugenics for its naive procedures. Its its neglect of environment, and above all, for its subservience to class interests. For these reasons, he is said to have pioneered the genetic critique of race concept. For these reasons, it was this work that was to inspire anthropologists such as Ashley Montagu, who based primarily, primarily on Hogben's work, denied the significance of biological concept of race, man's most dangerous myth, the fallacy of race. Which without surprise, Pessoas dizem que comunistas não pensavam na questão racial. Mas olha só, o primeiro ataque, os primeiros, inclusive no plural, ao conceito de raça foi feito pela esquerda, claramente inspirada por Marx e com claras tendências socialistas. Bom, não é surpresa para a gente, mas é surpresa para muita gente. Mas eram também pessoas que estavam na ponta do desenvolvimento da ecologia, como Hogbens. Hogbens, Hogbens' attack was viewed by many at the time as having knocked the bottom out of eugenics, raising the ire of figures like Carlos Blacker, General Secretary of Eugenic Society, oh my god, and a strong advocate of voluntary sterilization. Oh my god, it just get worse. Isso chocou um cara chamado Carlos Blacker, secretário-geral da Sociedade de Eugenia, um advogado da esterilização voluntária de grupos inferiores. Puta que pariu. Hogben's argument had drastically undermined the work of even Hogben's argument had drastically undermined the work of even the most respected eugenics, such as Reed A. Fisher and Pearson, both from the standpoint of bringing in the environment and mathematical technique, revealing um, I'm lost now. Revealing the class as well as racial bias of eugenics. Hogben indicated in Nature and Nurture in 1933 that hope for the future lay not in changing the genotype of human being, but in altering social relations. He presented the Eugenics Society sterilization program with contempt and characterized eugenics in general as an apology for snobbery, selfishness, and class arrogance. One of the first figures to back Hogben's analysis was the socialist geneticist G.B.S. Jo- Jo- I don't know, B.S. Hogben. J. J. B.S. Howden's new approach to human genetics and the question of race beginning in 1932, in which he too broached in social and environmental influences in a more complex dialectical analysis, followed closely on Hogben. After that, eugenics was never the same. As Mazumber concludes, it was the Marxist scientists who forced the change in the ideology and methods in human genetics. The attackers were left-wing radicals and sharply sensitized to the part played by class and eugenics problematic. Nevertheless, Hogben was critical of the failure of British left in general to take up the question of racism and apartheid in Germany and South Africa. He was especially concerned with Smoot's return to power in 1939, South Africa's alliance with British in the Second World War was, in Hogben's view, based on a tacit understanding that this would give South Africa continuing control of Namibia. All of this was explanation of the social causes of racism. Given this context, it is hardly surprising that his analysis of interdependence of nature and nurture arising out of his critique of eugenics has been credited, credited with launching the modern emphasis on gene-environment interaction in human development or genic future coevolution. In addition to resisting all forms of racism of biological race, Hogben was known for what Wersky called his lifelong adherence to feminist ideals. He was adamant that his colleagues not refer to his wife, Enid Charles, as Mrs. Hogben, and was critical of the notion that women, even in progressive Sweden, were seen as destined to be cooks and domestic servants for the household. All forms of social demolition of woman, demotion of woman were to be condemned, and for Hogben, the material basis of prejudice that designed woman as inferior. Ecology was a term running throughout Hogben's writes. He argued in Science for Citizen for a planet ecology of human life, evoking the utopian spirit of Morris. Science had created a more global civilization, but it had also enhanced the potential for local self-sufficiency. The early 1930s was being promoted by reactionaries as well as radicals, and the former seemed to be gaining the upper hand. Smooth, smooth holism was receiving growing support in the scientific community. Albert Charles Seward, who occupied the chair as professor of botany at the University of Cambridge and was president of the International Botanic Congress, saw smooth holism as a key to the study of evolution of plant life at the Fifth International Botanical Congress in Cambridge in August 1930. Smuts' views were represented by John Frederick Phillips, Smuts' leading South African followers within the botanical community. A big push was made at the conference to work out to work out. Phillips read a paper on the botanic community in which he argued that, in accordance with the holistic concept of smooths, the biotic community is something more than the mere sum of its parts. It possesses a spatial identity. It is indeed a mass identity with destiny peculiar to itself. Phillips also criticized Townsley for adopting a narrow perspective to ecology that left out animals and inorganic nature. Of greater overall significance was General Smuts' election as president of British Association for the Advancement of Science in 1931. The election was unusual as Smuts was not a practicing scientist. Ostensibly, this was due to the influence within the British scientific community of Smuts' holism philosophy, but it also had to do with the attempt of the British Association to extend its sphere of influence to the entire British Empire, of which Smuts was a symbol. Nevertheless, Smuts used the occasion to argue full bore for his holistic standpoint. In his presidential speech at the Association in London in September 1931, Smuts attacked the physicist John Tyndall's famous 1874 address to the Association, which was much admired by Marx and Engels as an unrestrained expression of the materialistic creed. Nature, in any truly meaningful sense, beyond more brute fact, was to be seen as construction of the mind. Great as is the physical universe which confronts us as a given fact, no less great is our reading and evaluation of it in the world of values. Without this revelation of inner meaning and significance, the physical universe would be but an immense empty shell, a crumpled surface. The brute fact, the brute fact here receives its meaning, and new world arises which gives to nature whatever significance it has. As against the physical configurations of nature, we see here the ideal patterns of walls freely created by the human spirit as a home and an environment for itself. A crude materialism, Smuts declared, had swamped geology for a generation, meaning the period subsequent to Darwin. Now materialism has gone by the board to the succeed by a new monism in the form of holism. In this holistic universe, he concludes, man is in very truth the offspring of the stars.